if we take the notion, let us say, of uh, the being of beings, whereby we do not mean being in Heidegger's sense, but rather being in the sense that Thales, uh, all is water, or Heraclitus, all is fire, is said, and we understand this in analogy um, with Hegel much later, when Hegel says that the cunning of reason is behind everything. This is also a claim about the being of beings. We understand those to move together, such that really at bottom, what are we asking? We're asking about the why of all things. Um, in one of the early thinkers, there's given this analogy between, um, I think, water and conversion of currency, of the transfer of currency. This principle, if you think of things like number understood as unit, where we abstract from anything we can count, as in, which is shown in its clearest form in Jacob Klein's book on the Greek ideas of mathematics. Oh, we abstract from anything we can count, uh, leaves, one leaf, two leaves, three leaves, anything we can substitutize. I mean, at a glance, we can say there's three things here, there's five things here. Um, but we go to this pure idea of the unit. Um, one is absolutely equal unit of one. We're making a similar abstraction when we go to the being of beings. We're not asking why did he get angry? Because uh, somebody slighted him, because the issues we could see in Dostoevsky's underground man was facing and became angry over, or because of the general issue that of social conditions. Why is he disgruntled? Because they are quote unquote everywhere, as Dostoevsky's underground man says, but I am nowhere, because there's some few elites or people that are all noticed, but I am not noticed. So why is this man disgruntled? Why is he spiteful? But this kind of why does not get us to the question of the being of beings, of the abstract why. So far as we consider this question of uh, all is out of water, and then there's some kind of way that we're understanding abstractly the um, all change, all happening is because of this, or all is fire, or all change, all happening is because of this. um, on analogy, if we can make the leap to saying the cunning of reason is of the same kind, it's still a why question, so that the unfolding of history is obscure to the individual, doesn't know why they're doing it, but they're following out this pattern of the cunning of reason over the overplay of the centuries, the movement of the idea across the centuries, as Carl Jung says. And it leads to the unfolding of the ultimate purpose in this ceaseless rest within the repose um, within that which we had all prolonged our existence for all along, according to the great purpose of the principle of equality under the law. Which is not, by the way, which, even though people may raise all kind of questions about that, the idea of equality of facing, the idea of competency or of merit, this is not, these same people do not, not just Jordan Peterson, but also others, they do not raise the question of the equality under the law and of the going back to the three estates or whatnot, of different legal regimes for different persons, in the Aristotelian sense, for instance, of the natural slave and so on. The principle of the equality under the law, I emphasize once again, Hegel seems to be um, utterly correct about his claim of the end of history in that sense, and that was the essential sense of the metaphysical claim he made. But then the question does arise, just what does equality mean? And then all human beings on the planet, planetarily, are involved in a dispute about what equality means. This is also so, from at least from empirical observation. Um, you could have some people that are against equality under the law, that's true, but of course, at least we can say they respond to the essential claim. And Hegel would say these are just romantics, and that even though there are some attacks on that, they can't ever come to power any more than, even if there were a long episode like Lenin supervening the series of history laid out by Marx, which did happen. Nonetheless, it would collapse eventually because that doesn't meet the requirements of the essential power of this principle, which is meant to explain the unfolding of history. So, if we understand the being of beings to be basically a why question, why does history happen? Why does it unfold? We can then set that aside and see that Heidegger, in raising the question of being, is simultaneously putting aside the question of a why. So even though it sounds often like Heidegger is bemoaning the why lacking, as Nietzsche speaks of nihilism, the why is wanting, the why is lacking. It's so that Heidegger, by speaking of being, introduces this radical enigma whereby instead of the why, there must be a choice taking. And this must come into the Dasein. Um, this is where I get into a little bit of there's some unclarity with regard to what Dasein means if there's no will anymore, like we were just talking about. If there's no will in Dasein, what does the steadfast resolution mean? Isn't steadfast resolution a kind of willing, a kind of um, determinate um, impelling of something to happen? Isn't this a kind of willing? But Heidegger denies that. So we have to try, if we credit Heidegger with having seen something and thought that's possible, we have to try to think it differently than that. The being I take to be a radical, I think the clearest example of that is the spatially, for instance, if we say we don't know what we are because the universe, for instance, the concept of being in a universe is radically unclear. It makes sense so far as you think kind of like I'm here, and you start to think in terms of right and left and east and west and north and south, and then you extend it out. But the original basic concepts really tell you where you are. If you bring the question, where are we, to the most radical enigmatic state, one can kind of see what that means. But then you extend it to everything. This is how I take Dasein being the only being that has for its essence, its existence means. It's the radical enigma of the possibility of Dasein to pose to itself questions and answer these questions in a way that is not, in a way that can affect the Geschichte, in a way that the world view can affect the Geschichte. Again, I'll say I have this from the 38, 39 lecture series. I have this, which I find very provocative, the section 34, Historiology and Worldview, where he says, when historiology is determined from a worldview and for the latter, comma, this is itself a historical moment of a specific kind. I find that very provocative. There's something in there about the relationship between the worldview, which is in some way identified with the human being, and